12:02, so why don't we kick off today's talk. Quick introduction, my name is Bradley Flam. I'm the director of the Office of Sustainability at Westchester University, and our office, along with the Office for Research and Sponsored Programs and the Office for Digital Learning and Innovation, along with the Sustainability Council's Scholarly and Creative Activities Committee, we are all co-sponsoring this series of talks this semester. This is the second of 12 in our Spring 2021 Sustainability Research and Practice Seminar. If you haven't yet seen the full schedule of talks, I think it's an amazing group of speakers talking about just a fabulous array of topics in sustainability research and in practice. If you haven't seen it, would like to, just take a look at our homepage on the university's website, wcupa.edu/sustainability. So without further ado, I would like to introduce and pass the digital floor to Professor Megan Schraedley.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brad and Amy, for organizing this, putting it together. So wonderful to see everyone here. Shout out to my public speaking students who are joining us today. It's great to have you here. So I'm going to share my screen first for the presentation and start off with a quotation. So give me 1 second as I share. Can I get thumbs up if folks can see this? Great, awesome. All right, so I'm Megan Schraedley, and I am an assistant professor in the Department of Communication and Media. And today I'm going to be talking about transition towns and transition networks from a teaching perspective. So looking at the pedagogy of teaching transition, and as an organizational communication scholar, thinking about how we can reorganize sustainably and at the same time do civic engagement and service learning through this type of work. All right, so here, let's see, I wanted to bring up the quote. Is a quote by Rob Hopkins, who is the first founder of the transition movement, with some of his friends who also worked in design and engineering. And in the early aughts, 2004, 2005, in Totnes, England, they were concerned about a lot of issues. So I want to start off with this lovely quotation. They say, our idea was a simple one. What if we wondered the change we need to see in response to the biggest challenges of our time came not from government and business, but from you and me, from communities working together? What if the answers were to be found not in the bleak solitude of survivalism and isolation, in the tweaking of ruthless commercialism, or in the dream that some electable savior would come riding to our rescue, but rather in reconnection to community? As we put it, if we wait for governments, it will be too late. And if we act as individuals, it will be too little. But if we act as communities, it might just be enough, and it might be just in time. As we begin floating this idea with our friends and the wider community, the term transition arose to describe the intentional act of shifting from high resource use, high carbon dioxide emissions, extractive business practices, and fragmented communities, to communities with a healthier culture, more resilient and diverse local economies, more connection and less loneliness, more biodiversity and more time, democracy and beauty. So I really like this quotation for thinking about slowing down and that intentional shift to a community that is not one that's just reliant on kind of bureaucratic practices or neoliberal or capital market-based practices, but something that's a different kind of way of organizing around issues that affect one's community, right, that are important to the community. So to give a preview for the rest of today, I want to go over a little bit of background and who I am and how I got into thinking about and teaching transition. And then I'll go into a little bit more about what are transition towns, how are they organized, and then I want to take a look at a few local transition towns in Media, Pennsylvania, so close by. And then finally wrap up with talking about teaching principles of transition and through a service learning framework for classes. And also talk about a sustainability experiment that I implement in my one of my upper level undergraduate courses. So my background is in food security and policy. So this is something I've been interested in ever since I worked in restaurants back in my undergraduate days as a server, and working and seeing a lot of the power differentials in restaurant spaces. So power differences between people of different backgrounds, different races, different classes, and wondering how those sorts of positions came to be. And that led me to my graduate work, where I worked in food pantries and on small CSA type farm settings where I was looking at smaller local food systems. And more recently, I'm really interested in how do we change that food system to become one that's more focused on the sovereignty of the people who are in control of the food system, and thinking about how we can do that through policy type pathways. I'm also really interested in this sustainable idea, right? One where we're building resilience or finding a way to not only bounce back from disasters or crises, but also bounce forward, right? Thinking about preparing for the future and making sure that our future systems are ready to handle things that might be unexpected and potentially dangerous for the growing population that we have. And then finally, I'm new to Westchester. I moved here in the summer of 2019, and I got connected with some folks at a local activist organization called the Westchester Green Team, which partners with the Westchester Office of Sustainability quite frequently to do lots of sustainability type programming, internships, and initiatives in partnership with the university. So through this Westchester Green Team, I was really interested in how can we blend the goals of this organization with some of the work that my classes are doing to give them some real world experience working with a local activist organization. So moving to how I got interested and what transition towns are all about. So the transition town movement, as I briefly mentioned in the beginning, started in the UK. And this was in response to a lot of fear around peak oil that people thought was kind of coming up in 2008 to 2010. And since then, we are kind of not sure maybe when peak oil is going to happen. Maybe it happened already, but certainly still we rely a lot on extractive types of energy for most of our day-to-day activities. So this transition movement was trying to address climate change, peak oil, and a labor movement that the folks were concerned about in 2005. In practice, this really has a lot to do with now groups that are in over 50 countries addressing issues of their local economy. So starting local complementary currencies and free stores, as we'll look at in an example from Media, Pennsylvania, sparking entrepreneurship in these towns through CSA programs, food pantries, or food hubs, and reimagining work and the reskilling of labor. So thinking about repair cafes, teaching and networking with local community members. So essentially the main goal of transition is to weave these webs of connection and support within a community without necessarily the oversight of a local government or a municipality, and also without kind of the influence of funding or money from local businesses. And one of the things that I think makes transition stand out from a lot of other grassroots movements is this adoption of kind of a thought process that story is the best way to get others excited about the movement. So they really talk about this in explicit terms around, why story is so important and what are the stories we can tell about others who are involved in transition. So, I'm happy to share the link afterwards or share the slides afterwards for you all to go and look at some of the other stories that are on the Transition Network website. So through the origins of the transition movement, I think it's also important to point out that this comes out of a design mentality, because I think that we can learn a lot from thinking with this design mindset, that we might be able to kind of redesign and reshape, reorganize our communities in such a way that helps them become more resilient, more sustainable. So I want to take a quick look at this example from Media, Pennsylvania. And I'm hoping this will play, and if not, I've got a backup way to play it. But there's transition towns that have popped up, as I mentioned, all over the world. And there's one even close by in Media, one in Phoenixville, and now Westchester is also going to be signed up in the next couple weeks, actually, as a transition town. So I wanted to look at this brief 4-minute video clip from Media, Pennsylvania, which talks about their free store and what kind of needs it's addressing in the town of Media. Share my sound with you all. Feel free to pop in if you can't hear it.
My mom and some of her friends at Transition Town Media came up with the idea for a free store. Everything is free. People bring stuff they no longer need and can also take things like books, DVDs, dishes, tools, office supplies, objects to decorate their house, and toys. But that's not the only reason neighbors come to the Media Free Store. Kids come to play, people come in just to talk with each other, or find inspiration for a new project. And lots of people volunteer because they believe in the free store. It helps keep things out of landfills and reminds us to spend less money on stuff we can easily share. Lots of people use social media to post pictures and tell stories about the stuff people bring and find at the free store. It gives us a way to reuse and recycle what we already have, which upcycle, which means making something totally new, like turning a chandelier into a chicken feeder. I think best of all, children learn about sharing at the free store. They love seeing how toys that they no longer use can make other kids happy. I know about transition towns and why we have a free store. It makes me proud to live here in Media, Pennsylvania. I think every community should have a free store.
So with that video clip, I think it's nice. It comes from the perspective of a child and someone who's engaged in the free store. And certainly free stores are something that appear in a lot of transition towns for the community members. Some of you might be familiar with the Buy Nothing movement too, where on Facebook groups you can go and exchange items, or people gift items to others, and you can go pick them up in your local community. So yeah, I see some people are definitely familiar with that. So I think there's a couple reasons why we should focus in on this grassroots movement as a good way to teach students how to think about reorganizing their community or their town or wherever they end up after WCU in a sustainable way. I think of this shift as something that is needed and is something that is worth examining. So the Westchester Green Team has decided to adopt becoming part of the transition town, because it definitely crosses over with quite a few of their programs that they already have in place. So the Westchester Green Team activist organization I mentioned earlier focuses a lot on educating the public about sustainability, and they do that through a garden program throughout the summer where they have kids come and work on raised beds throughout the summer. They value giving this information and sharing this information too with interns who are university students that then become very connected to the sustainability movement in the town. And they also educate the public through a series of film and panel discussions in the fall and in the spring. So it fits within the kind of hallmark principles of what Transition Town is all about. But some other reasons too for looking at transition towns is that I think it's a way to connect communities not only in one state, but across one's nation and internationally. So this, even though it started in Europe, it's spread to many other parts of the world. I think a lot of organizations and groups are very interested in the Transition Town network because it's a way to gain some recognition for the type of sustainability work that they're doing through this umbrella structure. And I also think it's a nice way to frame sustainability issues for communities that are facing a multitude of challenges. So not only challenges at the individual level, but maybe at the meso or organizational level. And they don't necessarily get to that macro level. The large nationwide transition network organization doesn't have funding that they give out to, other smaller affiliate organizations. But they do provide resources in terms of kind of how to structure your meetings or how to jump into the Transition Town movement. So the three principles of transition include this metaphor of head, heart, and hands. And with the head part of transition, this is, kind of what information can we share with others, and that educational portion of being part of the transition movement. The heart part of transition is, how is this work meaningful? So how do you build meaning making among people that are interested in sustainability issues? And the hand part of teaching transition or being part of the transition network is actually doing something. So it doesn't have to be physical. We're doing a lot of stuff virtually these days, so it can be doing in lots of different ways or through different capacities. And then the photo on the right is I want to share the book that I'm using this semester to teach my upper level undergraduate course titled Organizing and Sustainability. And this book, Resilience, Community Action, and Societal Transformation, connects a lot of principles that certainly work for me when I'm thinking about how do we organize, how do we communicate about organizing alternatively, and it brings in this transition network as a way to do that. So kind of an exemplar of what goes right, what goes wrong in transition movements across the world. So I'm going to shift from just talking about transition to service learning and civic engagement through transition. So in the fall of 2020, I partnered with the Westchester Green Team and the WCU Office of Sustainability. The Westchester Green Team, which is now going through this transition, joining the transition movement, and the Office of Sustainability is not connected yet maybe to the transition movement, but we still worked on sustainability initiatives with them. So the two things that we did, the first was creating videos about sustainability initiatives in Westchester and at the university. And the second project was to where my students planned, promoted, and executed 3 virtual events over the course of the semester. So in both classes, the students were broken up into groups of 5 to 7, and they worked on these initiatives together virtually over the whole course of the semester. And the panel and film event, I think, went particularly well, where we were able to plan a panel about water in the southeastern Pennsylvania area. The second panel was about celebrating local women who are working on sustainability initiatives. And the December third panel was all about working on who's working on sustainability activism, what kinds of things are they doing, and having both students and community members attend to learn more about sustainability during the semester. This spring, I'm teaching the course again and having my students work, continuing to work with the Westchester Green Team. And this semester, they are working on researching, promoting, and communicating with local organizations, especially small businesses, about adopting what's called the Borough Sustainable Storefronts Program. So the Sustainable Storefronts Program is affiliated with the the ban on single-use plastics that the Borough Council adopted in 2019. Unfortunately, as COVID hit last winter, the borough was not able to start implementing fines or to start pushing the single-use plastics ban in Westchester in order to kind of be sensitive to the needs of businesses. And so students now are helping the borough with this voluntary program that the borough has put out to have businesses adopt kind of no plastic or alternatives to plastic, especially for takeout containers, straws, things like that, for a lot of the local restaurants. So my students will be contacting these organizations, talking about plastic use and kind of the desire for other students to jump onto calling these organizations and spreading the word around about why they might want to step back from using single-use plastics. So I'm going to end by talking about a few things I've learned from doing this service learning and civic engagement through this transition model. So I have my students both last semester and this semester do something called the sustainability experiment, where they have to try something that makes their life more sustainable, adopt some sort of action or behavior that's shifting what they're doing currently to a new way of thinking about either their home life or their work life or something that they are connected to. So for example, some students decided to cut their showers down to 2 or 3 minutes from 10 minutes. Some other students decided they weren't going to use any single-use plastics in their day-to-day life. Others decided to go out and pick up trash around their communities. It was really flexible in terms of what they could do. It just had to be something that they could do for at least 72 hours. So last semester I had a shorter experiment just to try it out. This semester we're extending it to a little over a week to see how it goes. And they journal throughout that experience. So in the morning and the evening, they journal about what was complicated about that day, what they looked forward to, what they were thinking about as they were planning to adopt this more sustainable action. And then at the end, they wrote a summary reflection about how the sustainability experiment went. So I incorporated a few quotations from my students, just think through some of the things that they gained and also some new things that I learned and hadn't considered as I was planning this experiment. So the first student said that they were glad they were introduced to the experience of using less and adapting to a more meaningful solution to their plastic problems. I will definitely continue to use these methods as they are easy steps that can make a huge difference. I look forward to my continued use of my Starbucks cup. They bought a reusable Starbucks cup and a really cute reusable grocery bag. I'll be putting the rest of my family on to my new changes, and I hope that they will follow suit in living life sustainably. I plan to expand my knowledge of sustainability and how it fits into my life on a bigger spectrum. So I think this connects back to the head, heart, and hands principles of transition as they are excited to teach others how to be more sustainable, and it's more meaningful, so making that personal connection, and then that they're actually doing something, right? They're taking charge by adopting a different behavior. The second student talked a little bit about how they were feeling disenfranchised to get started on a sustainable activity because they felt like doing a small thing isn't worth it, that, you know, it's the big businesses, it's the bigger corporations that are the ones violating kind of climate change practices that would help us take a step back from, you know, putting out so many CO2 emissions or whatever the case might be. But the students said it helped them better understand just how easy it can be to make a change for the better. So they mentioned later on in the class discussion that that they felt good knowing that their other 25 students in the class were also doing this at the same time. So I think that's one of the things that's powerful about transition, because they know, you know, or if you're part of transition, you know others are also acting in a similar way. So kind of having that social connection is very important. And then lastly, the last quotation is from a student who I think pointed out something that's really important for me to address with future groups of students. The student said, however, I faced one mental challenge. Carrying items out of a store as a Black woman can be nerve-wracking. I never wanted to get racially profiled, so I made sure to have the receipt visible at all times. This mental challenge was a disappointment and an eye-opener. Although I am trying to help the earth, I could be risking my life. Another challenge I faced were mandatory plastic bags. And although I insisted to the cashier at Qdoba, did not need to bag my food, she stated it was policy. So I think this points out to me the kind of awareness that as an instructor, I need to carry with me in terms of what I ask my students to do and how they take on those behaviors or those new actions, and addressing that these new actions may have serious material consequences, not only in their own life, but in how others perceive them too when they're taking on those actions. All right, so some of the takeaways from doing the transition town service learning and civic engagement is that I think, you know, I'm talking about transition, I think, quite hopefully or quite positively in this talk, but that we should still take a critical approach to transition towns, not, you know, to be negative, but just to be aware that there are valid critiques of this way of organizing and of this way of adopting partnership with an organization or with a classroom. I think the action-oriented framework functions well for teaching to certainly an upper level group of students that are ready to apply some theory of what they're learning and to be able to implement that in a real world partnership with an organization. I do like this approach to alternative organizing because I think it points out different ways of being in the world, and that opens up options and opportunities for students going out into a multitude of interdisciplinary careers. I also want to mention that BIPOC communities and Indigenous community engagement is something that the Transition Town movement has been critiqued for, that they haven't done enough to engage marginalized populations that have been affected by certainly climate change and other types of extractive behaviors that and that they've been addressing for centuries, and that we are kind of co-opting often as white people, as people from the West, and not giving credit to those that came before. So thinking about who we're leaving out as we use this transition movement as an umbrella way of focusing on sustainability, and thinking about, you know, how do students from different backgrounds build resiliency through their courses, so adopt resilient behaviors that they'll then be able to take with them. And finally, thinking of the issues of power and the issues of equity in partnering with different kinds of organizations, whether they're activist organizations or businesses trying to you know, adopt a more corporate social responsibility framework and things like So thank you all so much for being here and listening to me chat a little bit about transition towns and teaching. I'm happy to, to open it up to questions, interactions, to dialogue about the classes. It's something transition is still something I'm learning about. And if others, know of other types of movements that are similar or want to discuss those, let's do it. Excited.
Thank you so much, Professor Schraedley. We generally just allow any participant who wants to unmute themselves to pose a question. I know I have a couple, but I'm going to hold back and let other people have a chance first.
I have a question about media, because I used to live in media, and like one thing, they're very proud of the fact that they're a fair trade town and everything, but one day I was just kind of thinking about it, and I don't know if the borough has any kind of legal standing to do anything about it, but they have a ton of restaurants and things that they still allow sub-minimum wage for servers and things like that. So can they really say that they're a fair trade town because of that?
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. And you're talking about tipped serving?
Yes, anything that, falls under the sub-minimum wage allowance, really.
Right, yes. I have to say I don't know about the media case. That's a really interesting question. I've thought a lot about that too, having worked in restaurants. My husband worked in restaurants for many decades up until, just COVID has basically put him out of work, and been wanting to, think about raising the minimum wage for a long time. Whether or not media can call themselves a fair trade town because of that, I don't know. It's a hard conversation.
Because it just seems like, they're focused on the, I guess all of the fair trade issues or what have you, but they're kind of ignoring the fact that they have plenty of people, working and probably not living in media because it's so expensive. I mean, that's why we left. Right. We couldn't afford it anymore. Right. And they're just pushing out a lower socioeconomic class. Like I consider ourselves like a blue collar class. And we're certainly not destitute or anything, but we don't have a ton of money. But all of these issues are kind of wrapped up in one or whatever, and that's apparently what fair trade is all about, trying to create equity or what have you. So it's like, they're focused on these global issues, but they're ignoring what's happening in their own backyard.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up, that transition's supposed to be about, right, your own community and what the problems are in your own community. And if it's only a small group of people that's talking about one thing, right, the free store or the fair trade, and only certain professions, you have to think about what professions are being left out or what people are not even engaged in the conversation.
And that was all. I'm done. I didn't really expect anybody to have a concrete answer on that one, but
no, it's a good point.
I wonder too, you had mentioned that one population is particularly marginalized, the Black, Indigenous people of color, from kind of this conversation and being brought to the table. Is there any research being done, or is there any movement to being more inclusive and being more diverse, or that you've seen? I mean, you may not know.
Yeah. So I know the Phoenixville community that is that's adopted some of the transition principles. They're trying to bring in more marginalized communities to the transition movement, to have them lead that movement in Phoenixville in particular. But as like a nationwide network and as an international network, I'm not certain. I'm not sure how they're bringing in, local labor communities or things like that, of people that have been fighting for similar things for a long time.
if I can jump in, I have a question for you. I was inspired by that that metaphor of head, heart, and hands, and I think in a lot of ways, a university is a good partner for the head and the heart part, the knowledge and the meaning. And we talk a lot about, say, the concept of career readiness, and that could be thought of as hands. But I don't know that universities in general have a good track record of sort of the more vocational skills that transition towns often talk about. We have some good examples of that. One of the participants today, Courtney Bodel, has used her work on campus and her studies to really learn a lot more about gardening and working with the soil. I wonder, to what extent can a university incorporate some of that sort of vocational education that is a part of transition towns?
Yeah, I think the university faces kind of this existential crisis, right? Are we training for careers? Are we training people to think in certain ways, which is what the liberal arts degree is supposed to be all about? And I think, right, I want to believe that we can blend those ways of being together, but I think you're right. I think it's really challenging to get people out in the field, so to say, and to be respectful of students' time, right? That you want to be respectful of the other jobs that they have, or whether they can drive themselves or get themselves to another location, for example. And I think that's hard if they're not expecting to be asked to do some of those vocational things in the classroom or outside of the classroom, spend time doing that. So it's a balance it's a tension I try to think about with my classes, but it's especially a challenge with you when you're only with them for 16 weeks or 15 weeks.
Hi, Megan. I think I can ask a question now. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the presentation. And I loved your emphasis on the individual level and the way transition towns are kind of at this in-between space. I was wondering about the macro level and whether there was connection in your course and program to things like sustainable development goals. And I also just mentioned it's coming from a place of, I work at Haverford College, and I've been reflecting a great deal on the ways in which small institutions are part of broader networks. So for instance, I know it's all in the works to be able to bicycle all through our region, right? But how is our attention making sure that's not just recreation, but actually like sustainable, and how are we working together to connect my students who do go to media a lot at Swarthmore? It's really not safe. I go back and forth on a bike, but it's really not safe. So I was just wondering about the attention to pushing on the governing policies ultimately do affect how our towns can be sustainable. Yeah,
no, that's such a good question. I introduced the SDGs to my students. And for folks that don't know, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which have kind of shifted over the last 25 years. And I think now are they the SDGs of 2050 or 2030? Do we remember? I'm trying to remember what they are, like where they're oriented towards.
I think 2035.
Oh, 2035
was the initial target.
Got it. Yeah. And I show them to my students just to give a background of what the sustainable, or give them definitions of sustainability and what sustainable development means from this, international organization's perspective. But we don't look at some of those larger macro policies and how, smaller movements like the transition movement or even smaller organizations are fitting into those or applying to those. But I think it's really important to talk about what do we mean when we say no hunger or no poverty, and who do we mean that for, and yeah, as Lorraine was mentioning, how do we leave people out of these, these really important goals? And I'd love to connect more to some of those. My dissertation was with some folks in USAID through the State Department, and it'd be fantastic to bring in some of that perspective of, what are kind of the larger defense goals of the US government, and how does that clash with or become a little bit ironic with the goals of the United Nations.
Thanks so much for that answer. I'd love to keep connecting, and great to email with
Absolutely.
you and Bradley Flam earlier as well. But just would say I appreciate also your focus on inclusion. And I think one of the things we've been wrestling with is the way in which attention to sustainability is profoundly related to the way that the climate crisis, where its most harmful effects affect people. And people in the communities outlying Philadelphia are often environmentalists in name, right? But again, the structure question, we also are often the worst offenders when it comes to contributing. So working through these issues are,
Yeah, there's a lot there for sure in terms of, with for example, the sustainability experiment, trying not to make my students feel ashamed or stigmatized for what they're doing right now, but that, that the transition, the change part is the kind of important focus. And just to have them realize that not everyone operates in the same way or functions in the same way all around the world. This semester, I'm going to be playing around a little bit with the footprint calculator, footprint network, that has students look at, how many Earths would it take to have, if everyone lived the same lifestyle that they did. And yeah, Eric Hartman, I'd love to stay in contact and hear more about what Haverford's doing, and just learn more about this area and what schools are thinking about connecting.
I can jump in with another question, but I don't want to monopolize. I was really inspired by the student comments to the assignment you gave them. And there were numerous specific comments they made that resonated with me, but one that made me think about some of the work our office is doing, our Office of Sustainability at the university is doing, is the comment about it being easier when these practices become routine. And my academic area of expertise is in transportation planning and travel behavior. And it's really understood that the time to get people to consider more sustainable forms of transportation, for example, sharing rides or taking public transit or biking or walking, is when their routines are broken, when they start a new job or they arrive at a new university, because they have to develop new patterns of doing things, and they're often more open to trying something that's, out of their routine.
Right.
And we've been thinking about this a lot because, cross our fingers, our community is going to be back on campus for the fall semester, pandemic conditions permitting, of course, but we hope that we'll all be coming back. And every fall, it's great to have so many new students arriving. This coming fall, we may have 2 full classes of students arriving on campus for the same time, at the same time. Half of our undergraduate student population. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts about how the break in routine that the pandemic has represented and that returning to the lives that we sort of had before the pandemic, what opportunities does that open up in terms of developing new and more sustainable behaviors?
Oh, I really love that question. So I think the break is super important to making, creating new patterns. And I think a lot about kind of the, I guess the culture that I grew up in when I went to my undergraduate in Boston from Kansas City, and not knowing anyone and not knowing kind of how to do things the Boston way. And so I would have liked to have had someone to show me around. And I think that might be interesting to think about. I don't know kind of to what extent we could set up some sort of mentorship or helpful program to have students that have been here for a while and use the bus route or use the bike racks or whatever to get people to kind of do those things together and to have that social connection right away that says this is the norm and we do it for these sustainable reasons, or this is what you do to get to this place even more quickly than you would if you drove and had to find parking and blah blah blah. But yeah, I think having that partnership of folks that are here and that have bought into the Office of Sustainability's transportation initiatives to kind of help them navigate, physically navigate the city would be helpful.
Thank you. Yeah. And the very name Transition Town sort of implies, a change, an evolution, a break with the way things have been done. So good.
Yes,
I like those connections. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just add one more thing since you mentioned continuing to connect. We've tried to put together a kind of introduction to local and international civic action that's rooted in our area. So I'm dropping that there because we made it open access on purpose, and hopefully the connecting device for there's a lot of folks on this call dedicated to sustainability, and that's just awesome. Appreciate Westchester's leadership on that.
Thank you.
That's so great. Yeah, thank you. Definitely look at it.
We are at 12:50, and at this point, we even if the conversation is still going, we like to pause because many people will have to log off now and get prepared for a class or something else at 1 o'clock. So if you do need to log off, thank you for joining us today, and thank you to you, Professor Schraedley, for sharing your thoughts and your knowledge and experiences with us. So please join me in a virtual round of applause for our speaker today.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Megan, if you can stay on a few minutes, if there are any more questions, that would be great. But for those of you who do have to go, thank you for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
I keep jumping in.
Please, yeah.
I wonder, Courtney, can I ask you what this presentation, if you made any connections to the work you've been doing with gardening and with the green team and connecting the university to the community?
Yeah, like, do you mean specifically? I feel like I came to this presentation because I took part in Dr. Schraedley's work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what she's doing is really important in terms of connecting the university, which teaches a lot of ideology, to like the hands-on organizations. I would love to see more hands-on work in the realm of gardening at the university level, of course. But it's not always achievable for various reasons. So I think it's very important, not only in the community to be forming active coalitions, but for that bridge to be formed. And I think that's why Dr. Schraedley's work is so important.
Thanks, Courtney.
Yeah. You don't see it very often. It's kind of fresh and new. And I'm hoping with the next couple of years, like this transition will allow us to create more bridges like that. One thing that comes to mind is like Denise Polk's seed library. I would love to see more of that. It would be an easy way to get students to do more hands-on work. You know, there could be like virtual classes taught, and then some sort of bridge, like with the communication students where they cover that and they talk about that, they do presentations about that work. It's like maybe like a small example.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm really excited by the possibilities that open up with Westchester becoming affiliated with the Transition Town movement. I think that is going to spur those of us at the university to think harder about how we can make those connections. And I think the connection between the Center for Community Solutions and the Westchester Green team is a really good model that we ought to think about expanding in ways that builds on this idea of, you know, also including along with intellectual growth and knowledge, you know, creation, the idea of learning practical skills for living, and I'm excited by the possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I wish I could get more feedback from my students, and I know the evaluations have been totally crazy since COVID started. But to get more of a sense of what students think of these partnerships, because, you know, in some ways I try to be careful about, you know, my connection to these organizations and the, you know, whatever the affiliation is of my students, if they've got certain political leanings or not, and kind of trying to really root it in theory and have them understand this is just a way of practicing these principles. But, you know, I don't know what they think, if they're confused or if they learn something from it. You know, it's really hard to know what they're taking away from it.
Yeah, I think if there were more opportunities for hands-on experience, that feedback would be easier to get as well. So I don't know. I always have ideas. It's just a matter of like, how do they come to fruition?
And I think certain partnerships might be more suitable for certain programs or certain disciplines compared to others. And yeah, I know the Center for Civic Engagement and Service, what is it? SESI. Civic Engagement.
Social impact.
Oh, sorry.
Social impact. Yeah. That they're really good about getting faculty on board with, you know, becoming comfortable with this idea of bringing partners into a class. And it is a challenge, right? The Westchester Green team, I'm so grateful that they let me continue to work with them consistently semester to semester. And I think that's important too, to not just do a one semester thing and then drop the partner. And that's a challenge too, to keep that going.
Yeah, I think, you know, if we're going to be successful at this level of campus community collaboration, whether it's under the larger umbrella of this concept of transition towns or not, you know, we're going to have some efforts that don't succeed or don't continue, and others that will, and that's where we're going to learn about how to do this better.
Sure.
You know, so we'll propose some things and they won't fly, and other things that are going to take off in ways we didn't expect. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And the bikes they're gone now, Brad, right? From
the Zagster bike share bikes have been removed from campus. Yeah, Zagster went bankrupt, and
bummer.
So we're having conversations about what we might do to offer an alternative to that, but we're still working on it.
Yeah.
Megan, I'm sorry, I have a meeting at 1, so I'm going to have to log off, but thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Send me the recording when it's ready and good, and I'll share it with my 1 p.m. students.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Fantastic.
All right. Thank you, Megan.
Thanks. See you.
Thanks for coming.